Mute it?
What?
Did you mute that?
No, it's not working.
It's not 6 yet. It's only 6 now. There you go.
But I don't hear any sound.
They just started.
Bộ về cơ. 我们开始，请大家请坐。我哋就快開始，請大家坐低。如果要攞食嘅話，可以喺後面攞食。我哋就開始開場。Hi everyone, it's so nice to see so many familiar faces from around the neighborhood, the community surrounding this new development that we're going to talk about tonight. Thank you for being here. We're going to get started any second. I see folks still looking for chairs. There's plenty up front, plenty on this side where Grace is. Don't be afraid to sit next to Grace. All right, well, welcome everyone. Just want to give a quick welcome and introduction to the organizers of tonight. My name is Sarah Ting. I'm the Director for Programs at CBCAC, the Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community. And I have the pleasure of being here with sharing the stage, or really the stage is for the Teen Coalition of Chinatown. So I'll let them introduce themselves as well. But I just want to say a quick word about CBCAC. We're a civic education and community planning organization, and we're focusing our efforts in promoting an equitable and sustainable Chinatown. So we're so glad you're here tonight, and I'll pass it back to you.
Hello, everybody. Great to see you all today, especially with the rainy-ish weather. Thank you for coming. My name is Yujin Chen, and I'm the founder and leader of the Teen Coalition for Chinatown. Unfortunately, not a teen myself. Would love to be with these bright young minds. But we are a team of 15 to 20 active high school students from across Chicago with the common goal of elevating Chinatown's voice in the planning and development of Chicago. And in this case, the 78 as our direct name. Our goal is to prevent possible consequences of development, but also harness potential benefits and really make sure that we can platform Chinatown and its leaders in the future of our city. And over the past 2 years, our project has engaged 40 active high school students actively working on this and engaged many, many more. Our goals right now are community education, engagement, and advocacy. And you'll hear a lot from our wonderful teams later today as they present about the research that they've done and the work that they've done in learning more about the 78 potential impacts and also the history of Chinatown.
Thank you, Eugene. So CBCAC is very proud to be a close partner and fiscal sponsor for the Teen Coalition of Chinatown. If we can go to the next slide, please. And hi to our friends online. Hello. Okay, so this is the quick agenda for the evening. We're going to have the teams, like Eugene mentioned, talk about what's going on currently, what we know, and what as community leaders and organizers what we're concerned about, and what this could mean for Chinatown. So we're happy to be breaking it down for you today. And then we'll go into a time for Q&A and open forum for questions. You'll see mics up front. And then we'll have time for community input at the back where Ethan is standing, Ethan, can you wave? So we have some activities there for after the presentation. And don't worry, we'll give you a little break in between as well. We know it's a lot of information. So
just a couple of notes for those on Zoom. For translation, you will have to click on Spanish for Mandarin translation and Chinese for Cantonese translation. So again, Spanish for Mandarin and Chinese for Cantonese. Also, I wanted to make a quick note. All of you should have received a note card and pen upon arrival. So grab more if you want. We have Alan in the back with more note cards and Audrey in the back. If you guys want to wave. Those are for during the presentations as all of our speakers go. Write down any questions that you might have. And then Alan and Audrey, raise your hands again. They will be collecting those note cards from you at any point during the presentation, because after every section, we'll have a mini Q&A before we get to the open forum Q&A. So just repeat, write down questions as they come, and then raise it in the air once you're done with it, and Ellen and Audrey will collect it and choose 3 questions to be answered after every section.
Yeah, so before we jump in, I'm excited to bring up CBCC's Executive Director to make a couple of remarks. Grace Chan McKibben to come up and say a little bit. Grace has dedicated her whole life to sustainability and nonprofit and the good of the community. So we're excited to have her kick us off, and then we'll pass on to the team. So Grace, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I want to first have a couple of housekeeping for folks that are presenting later. Please make sure you speak slowly for the interpreters that are doing Cantonese and Mandarin. And I'm going to say in Cantonese and Mandarin the instructions that Jing just gave. 如果你在线上要用普通话听翻译的话，请用西班牙语 Spanish 的这个单词。然后如果你可以听广东话的话，就请用 Chinese speaker models. Anyway, so my name is Grace, as Sarah said, I'm the Executive Director of Pollution Prevention Engineering Committee. Our mission is to bring community voices together and amplify the voices, and we would like to have as many people participate as possible. To that end, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of our Alderwoman, Nicole being here. Thank you so much for your support and for being here. But I think it's very important because we know that as a long-term resident of Chinatown, you understand how important this community is. We have recently been designated a state designated cultural district, and we had the community has been in this area in this particular location for over 110 years. So we'd like to be able to continue to grow. Chinatown in Chicago has been touted nationally as the only grown Chinatown in North America. That might be a little bragging, but at least it is one of the most vibrant Chinatowns in North America, and we'd like to keep it that way. And I also see Udo Otari way back there from the mayor's office and the director of policy. Thank you very much for being here and for your support of what we're doing as well. I think that what we'd like to talk about today is that everybody has heard about development, and we know that the 78 is one piece of undeveloped land, and we hear more from the teams about why it's important to our community. And we want to be able to both give the potential advantages and disadvantages, and let you all have a way to make your own opinion, inform your own opinion, and give your own ideas, and then we get back to these factors. And this is what we aim to do, and it's what the service is. And with that, we're going to make the real stars of this meeting, which are the members of our team coalition for Chinatown.
Okay, thank you, Grace, for introducing me, and thank you everyone for being here today. So today's presentation will be about the 78, but before I even get into the 78 or the details of the 78, I'm going to ask everyone to have a show of hands. So how many people in this room have heard of the 78 or know what it is? Okay, so a good number of people. Now I'm going to ask everyone to put their hands down. So how many people have heard of the 78 or know about the 78 through sources other than CBCC or CBC? So how many people have heard about it? Okay, yeah, so that's a good amount of people. Okay, amazing. So I'm going to go into what the 78 is and give a more formal definition. So to define the 78 more clearly, the 78 is a $7 billion mega development project aiming to become Chicago's 78th neighborhood. It is located on abandoned railroad track, one of Chicago's largest remaining undeveloped land parcels. So if you're familiar with the Roosevelt question, you can see on this map that's located a little more south from Roosevelt question, and it is a 62-acre site. Due to the huge investment needed to develop something on this land, it has remained untouched for decades, but due to recent expansion of downtown and rising South Loop, there have been more incentives to build on this land. To give more context about the timeline of the 78 and how it has come to be, Related Midwest originally bought the land in 2016. And originally, they wanted to find a financial anchor project to make the development possible. With the rise of remote work and changes in market conditions due to COVID-19, developers had differing ideas for what the anchor project would be. Some of which was a bid for a casino, Amazon HQ, or possible stock stadium. However, all these ideas went back to the drawing board due to various reasons. So throughout the timeline of the Sun Gate, there have been multiple ideas of how they can have an anchor project or make it more attractive, but time and time again, there have been different projects that have been going back to the drawing board. Currently, they are planning to build the Fire Soccer Stadium. So if any of you guys are into sports, maybe you've heard of it before, but the Fire Soccer Stadium is the current anchor of the project, and there have been many quick developments on the plans of how the stadium will be built. Furthermore, one of the largest community benefits they're planning on building was the Discovery Partners Institute, also known as the DPI. And it was planned to use and stimulate homegrown innovation, but it was through from October of last year. But to get into the details of what the Summit is and the things that it will include, to give a brief overview, it will have around 62 acres of land. And around 6 of those acres will have green space, around 1/2 will have riverfront, and around 20% of it will have affordable housing. In terms of community members and neighborhoods that it will be around, there are many different neighborhoods that the Summit Eats from. For instance, Little Italy, Pilsen, Bridgeport, and Chinatown. Now, getting into the vision of the Summit 8. Last month, Related Midwest unveiled their vision for the space at Townhall with 3rd Ward Alderman South. After years of looking for an anchor tenant, they're able to find one with the Chicago Fire Stadium, which I'll get into in the future. They unveiled different themes throughout the space, some of which are the fire line district, the stadium, the courtyards, and the lots. So first, for the fire line district, this will be on the Port Portland side, so coming from the Roosevelt collection, and this is the entrance to the stadium from the downtown area. From this area, they'll have a lot of commercial things, such as restaurants or places that people can eat at or shop around. And so from this area, they will be able to just relax themselves before going into the stadium. Now, the next part of it is the actual stadium itself. So this stadium is the soccer fire stadium, and this is where sports teams or games or related events will be held. From there, we have the courtyards. So the courtyards will include different high-rise apartments and also the affordable housing mentioned previously. I'll also have a mixture of green space because part of the 78 is mixing commercial and different infrastructure along with greenery and green space. So from here, there will be a mix of apartments and housing along with green space. Now from there, you can move into the wilds. So the wilds will include more nature and greenery and parks and playgrounds. So in this space, there will be a lot of greenery for people to enjoy this area. Now the main theme of the 78 is the way that it moves from urban to natural greenery. So we can see over here is from the commercial district or urban infrastructure. But as we move on, it goes from greenery and then more like parks and in general, just overall nature. And this is the whole theme of the 78. Furthermore, they're not directly depicted in this picture. They plan to have a riverfront with half of a mile of riverfront. Through the riverfront, downtown and Painesville Park will become more connected. And in addition, Related Midwest have proposed having the commons, which is the park and the walk. Well, this is the proposed vision. It's not a set plan and will actually be in place depends on the market conditions and investors in the project that Related Midwest will be able to recruit. Now, moving on from the vision, we will be talking about the stadium. Now, the stadium is the 78's anchor tenant, as I stated before, and the proposed fire stadium will be privately funded by fire owner billionaire and founder of Morningstar, Joe Mansueto, with developers planning to start building it at the end of 2025 and finish construction by 2028 in time for the 2028 Major League Soccer season. The stadium will encompass around 9 to 9.5 acres of this total 62 acres. Now, in terms of the details of the actual stadium itself, it is around a $650 million project. And though this is the estimate, it may be unclear what the actual details of the cost are, as there may be different infrastructural changes that happen throughout the development of the stadium that may impact the total cost. From there will be an estimate of around 22,000 seats and 1,200 parking lots. And so considering that there is 1,200 parking lots with 22,000 estimated seats, it is expected that game goers will be using nearby parking lots, such as Roosevelt Collection or even Chinatown parking lot in order to enter the stadium or just move around the 78. As Chinatown and Roosevelt Collection have close proximity to the stadium and will be convenient to park and go to and from there. Furthermore, there will be around 20 player games per year. And so this means that the soccer team will have around 20 games, and it will usually be in February to October, as that is when the soccer season is typically held. Furthermore, they may potentially host concerts or other related events, as Soldier Field and other related stadiums also do so. It is currently unclear the amount of rural events that may take place, but it's pretty clear that it will attract many residents and tourists alike to the 78 and the surrounding area. Now, moving on from there, I'll be talking about transportation. So, in terms of how people get to and from the stadium, transportation is a pretty relevant topic. So, in terms of transportation, there will be, or in the original proposal, there were different plans on how people can enter the stadium. So, if you look at the original proposal plan, there was the metro realignment that they plan to do, which is in rapid. And in addition, they also plan to have things such as a new CTA station. In addition, they also plan to have things such as an extension of 15th Street. And so all these new additions were planned to happen in the original proposal. So I'll highlight it over here, one of which is the metro realignment. This was the proposed CTA station. And then there was different proposals for the extension of 15th Street. However, with current plans, they are not realigning the metro or having a new red line stop, with their main focus being on the roads. So as of right now, you can see, although this graph is a bit confusing and has a lot of arrows, there are two main entryways to the 78, with that being from the north and from the south. So this is from the north, and then this is from the south. So the main focus that I want to emphasize here is that with the current vision, people will be entering and exiting 78 mainly from north or southern entryways. As of right now, the blue is current entryways that we have right now, and then the things in pink/purple are proposed entryways that they plan to build, with it being more on an elevated structure, as the Roosevelt Collection is more on elevated ground. So having it go from an elevated to a ground level road would help people enter and exit the 78. Furthermore, in terms of new transportation options that they may offer, they are planning or propose to have a new water taxi stop. And so this would help utilize the river. And so if there are any tourists or visitors who would like to visit the 78 and would not like to maybe walk there and want to have a new transportation option, the 78 developers right Midwest have proposed having a new water taxi stop. From there, I'll be talking about tips. So in terms of how the 78 will fund everything and how it will make the new water taxi stop or maybe even the stadium itself, tips are pretty relevant and important to how they will do so. So since related to this Midwest goal and 2018 proposal from the City of Chicago Planning Commission, the 78 plans have changed significantly. In terms of public improvements, it's helpful to look at how the tips have changed since the original approval. Before we begin, I'll dive into what TIPs are. So TIPs stand for tax increment financing, and essentially it is a funding strategy used by local governments to rebuild underdeveloped areas, such as former abandoned railroad, serving as a base for the 78. It is essentially a way for the government to borrow money and then use anticipated tax revenues as higher property values to pay back the original debt, such as bonds, while generating a surplus for property values for the city and developers. And so to put it more simply, or to put it into simple words, essentially any property owners within the 78 would pay a base tax. But with the tip, they will pay an increment tax. And so as the years go by, the amount of taxes they will pay for will slowly increase. And, as they increase, the amount of tax revenue that they will be able to generate will be used as reimbursement for related Midwest to use to fund public infrastructure. So essentially, any property owners who pay this tax would be paying it, and all the money generated would be used as reimbursement. And so this can be used to fund different public infrastructure. And as you can see on the side, there are different ideas of how they would be able to use the tips, because tips are very specific, and the way that they are used are very specific and must get approved every time. And so the bullet points over here were proposed ways in which they would be able to use the tips. However, as I stated before, ideas such as realigning the red line station or the metro are not currently happening, and it is seen in the crossed out bullet points. And so the main way they're planning on using the TIF is using it for the reconstruction of the riverfront. So originally, they planned on using 551 million in TIFs, but because they are not implementing all these ideas, related Midwest will likely need to go back to the Community Development Commission for approval of the new TIF. And they have suggested that it may be lower than 551 million, since they're not using the TIF on all of these proposed ideas. And so considering the TIF and all the different factors used to, or like in the 78, this is just a brief overview of the 78, what it may include and what it holds for the future. Now, if people have any questions, we'll move on to a short Q&A portion of any questions that people may have, and we'll be answering around 3 questions. If there are any questions that are unanswered, they'll be answered later in a future Q&A session. And so please don't worry if all questions are not answered during this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Audrey, Alan, did you all get any note cards or any questions from Zoom? No worries if not, we can transition to the next session if not. Any questions from the audience? Okay, great. We'll transition to Matthew, another one of our students. I will go over a bit of our concerns.
Hello, my name is Matthew. I'll continue talking about, you'll never guess, the 78. Specifically, community benefits and concerns. So on housing, although plans for the 78 have changed, Related Midwest has claimed that their commitment to affordable housing hasn't. With a 20% affordable housing commitment and over 1,000 new affordable units. But what does affordable housing mean? According to the 2015 Affordable Housing Ordinance, affordable housing means 1, rental housing is affordable to households earning up to 60% of the area median income. And 2, owner-occupied housing is affordable to households earning up to 100% of the area median income. However, it's important to note area median income depends on the area supplied, which is different from neighborhood to neighborhood. For example, what's affordable in the South Loop is different from what's affordable in Chinatown. While this may sound good on the surface, there are many ways to bypass the requirements for affordable housing. First off, not all affordable units need to be built on site. Back in 2018, Related Midwest and the city negotiated that up to half of these units can be built off-site, with at least half of those off-site units being built in the Pilsen Little Village pilot area. Secondly, they are able to bypass the requirements for affordable housing by paying off the Chicago Housing Board. In that same year, 2018, Related Midwest paid for some of their affordable housing upfront with a $10 million payment to the city. Although they claim this won't change the fact that they're committed to 20% affordable housing, it's important to understand what that actually means and look beneath the surface in order to reap benefits. Now, let's talk about another potential community benefit, jobs. The 78 is said to bring in over 10,000 construction jobs, and 5,000 permanent jobs. Regarding these new jobs, Related Midwest says they plan to meet or exceed Chicago's NWBE and 50% residency requirements. But what do these requirements mean? It means that Related Midwest must have a certain number of MWEs, minority business enterprises, and WBEs, women business enterprises, depending on their contract with the city. In addition, the total hours worked on site by employees must have been at least 50% done by residents of the city, so people who live in Chicago. These requirements are meant to benefit the community and create a more equitable workforce. However, these actions may not necessarily benefit Chinatown. For example, in 60616 Chinatown zip code, there are 75 MWBE firms. However, only 4 of those MWBE firms are Asian-owned, compared to 52 Black-owned and 8 Hispanic Latino-owned firms. Unbelievable, right? In Chinatown, a place abundant with Asian-owned businesses, only 4 has been registered as a WNBE. Why? This is the case due to language barriers and complicated and rather tedious paperwork and certifications needed to register. In addition, Hire 360, a workforce initiative improving accessibility, careers, and trade industries, was co-founded by Related Midwest to help fulfill this equitable job pipeline. Though to add some nuance, these jobs are typically placed solely through unions and require certification and union recognition, meaning that those who don't fulfill these requirements are at a disadvantage. Chinese businesses and workers typically are not union, so that's contextualized to Chinatown. Well, there are some concerns for the hiring process. The point is, there are a lot of benefits that are possible. 10,000 construction jobs, 5,000 permanent jobs, to remind you all, but we need to be at the table in order to harness them. Now, I'm excited to introduce Chinatown community leaders Debbie Liu and David Wu, who will be speaking on their concerns regarding 78. Debbie is the president of the Chinatown Advisory Board, and David Wu is the founding executive director of Hotan Center. He also graciously lent us the space to hold this town hall. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Debbie. I am the current Chinatown Park Advisory Council president. But I'm also pretty involved in both the Chinatown and the South Loop community. I was born and raised in Chinatown. Thank you. I have been following this project for a very long time, since its inception. So it has gone through many different iterations. Like folks said in the beginning, when it was bought, it was in 2016. But it was under a different mayor and a different alderman. It was Mayor Rahm Emanuel and Alderman Solis in the 25th ward. And then over time, it became Mayor Lori Lightfoot and Alderman Byron Sixto Lopez. And then more recently, there was a redistricting that happened. And so now the property is third ward under Alderman Pat Dowell and now Mayor Brandon Johnson. So this property actually has a lot of political and a lot of just like history around it. And I just want to make sure that folks understand why this property is even more groundbreaking than it is. And the other thing I want to mention is that this property has a lot of potential, but it also has a lot of potential positives and negatives and maybe unintended consequences that come out of it. My hope is that this really expensive property that it's going to be developed in the next coming years will be developed, but there is not just this responsibility to preserve and the history and culture of Chinatown, but also it has this potential to really change the future and its promise to Chinatown residents. Like, I sit on the board of Chinatown Park Advisory Council, and the park, Chinatown Park actually abuts this property on the the northern end or the southern end of the park. Whatever happens on this property will have a direct and immediate effect on Chinatown and on the park. So we really wanna proactively plan for this catalytic investment. And the ways that we wanna do that, have been already identified with housing and transportation. I know we talked about TIF, and riverfront access. Those are all really good things. However, there are details that have not been shared and are not, fully transparent and accountable. So if we want to hold developers or even the city accountable, we really need to better understand what these things look like and how they all fit in. And not to say let's approve this stadium or let's approve this housing complex and then work on the next thing, because we really need to understand and see this whole picture so that the community is more informed and can better act in a way that actually does think about everyone's opinions and facts as we move forward. So I'm not necessarily for or against this project. I really want to make sure that people really have a chance to say what they want to say about this project and really provide their input, because this is going to really affect all of us, not just in the coming years, but really for generations to come. So as people mentioned, that this is one of the last properties in Chicago that remains undeveloped. Yeah, there is such a great potential, but we really need to do this together. So I really hope that people do engage later today, and have a chance to really talk through some of the positives, negatives, and different consequences that might come out of it. Thank you.
David's not here, you can go.
Thank you, Debbie, that was very inspiring. These concerns are why we need community input. Like Debbie said, they're speeding for construction. They have a lot of potential, and right now it's too preliminary to say that we're for or against the stadium. But there's obviously things that we need to, like we said, be proactive about, the planning and development projects. So, on that note, what has Chinatown's voice look like in the 78? Despite Limited Midwest's claims of community development commitment, Chinatown's voice in the 78 over the past 8 years has led the creation of the 78 Community Advisory Board in 2017 by Mayor Lord Lightfoot. However, ultimate downfall has been stated that this council no longer exists after it last formally met in 2022. After 3 years, we hope this council will reconvene. In addition, in 2021, Related Midwest put in a bid with the city for an entertainment district with a casino. In 2022, after strong Chinatown organizing, where CBCAC amassed over 2,000 signatures in dissent, the developers plus bid to build a casino there. This demonstrates that we use our voice and advocate for developments that actually benefit Chinatown. Now, looking at the bigger picture, there is also a history of the city compromising the public good for private political interests. For example, in 2003, much of the ABLA loans, which are public housing buildings, were leveled to make way for 2,771 new mixed-use, mixed income housing units, including some affordable housing with the right to return for ABLA residents. Related Midwest was the chosen developer for these new units, but by 2008, they were behind other quota, and most of that housing was never built. In 2022, Mayor Lord Lightfoot leased 23 acres from the Chicago Housing Authority land to the Chicago Fire Soccer Team to build training facilities and business offices. Just 2 months later, Lightfoot's campaign received a $25,000 donation from the Chicago Fire owner Joe Matsumoto. That land was promised to the original community for housing decades ago. This is just another example of the city putting aside the public good for private and political interests. Now I'm excited to invite Chinatown community leaders Consuelo Hendricks and Angela Lynn, co-founders and co-presidents of People Matter, to speak on their concerns regarding the 78. After, there will be a 5-minute intermission. Take it away, again.
Hello everyone, how's everyone doing? Good. Thank you for coming to the community meeting. My name is Angela Lynn and I'm co-executive director of People Matter.
My name is Priscilla Hendricks, and I'm also co-director of Matter. So today we're going to talk about the importance of like public housing. And I'll ask that.
So we have been advocating along with some other community organizations in Chicago for more public housing, 19,000 more units in the city of Chicago, which is the maximum. So we're 19,000 units below the maximum. And we think it's really important for public housing because a lot of our seniors, a lot of our low income community members of color, immigrants need public housing, our families need public housing. And currently the wait list for Chicago Chinatown senior housing is about 20 years. The wait list is up to 25 years, 30 years for Chicago Housing Authority. So if you think, you're a senior, you're 65, you're gonna be 85 by the time you can enter, public housing. And so we really need a lot more public housing in the city.
And that's why we feel like it's really important that that's why we think it's really important that the 78 neighborhood has some type of public housing there. One for our Chinese seniors and also for low income families that need it because we feel that it's really important for people to have housing, especially in this economy.
And so we're worried about the Chicago Fire's plans for the soccer stadium because of issues of displacement, but also because Chicago Fire has used public housing land that used to have 3,600 units of public housing. So they took the public housing land and built a training facility that had its ribbon cutting in March of this year. So even though they are not using public funding for the actual stadium, they have used public housing land for the training facility, and that used to be 3,600 units. So that's something we're definitely concerned about, is if you're using TIF money from this area from Chinatown, and you're also using public housing land from the city of Chicago, there should be some investment back into public housing and into the communities that are nearby and are.
And then lastly, we embrace the investment in the community, and we also hold for public housing to help house some of the most vulnerable people in our community. Thank you.
Okay, so there was just a lot of information, and I know that there's questions for clarification, there's questions in your mind. So if does anyone have any questions they want to bring up, then we can answer those before we take a 5-minute break. Any points of clarification? Audrey has one? Okay.
Why wouldn't we be able to ask for resources to be set aside for keeping the community for?
Why can't we?
Why wouldn't we be able to ask for resources to be set aside for keeping the community affordable?
I think we can, and that's why we're here today. We really want to educate the community on what this plan looks like, what the potential impact looks like, and we'll go into more community education in the future about topics like how will this actually happen, how does displacement and gentrification happen, so we can come up with common solutions together. And I see another question. Ethan has it, and Alan has a question.
I have two, one is online and one is in person.
Oh. Thank you, Alan.
I guess I'm not three, but I'll ask the first one.
Is like the mic's not.
Hello?
I'll read a question we have from students. We have a question that says, are the Chinatown property taxes only used for the TIF?
Are the Chinatown property taxes also used for the TIF? They're not.
They work through.
They were historically, but are no longer. We have a TIF fixed for. Thank you, Judge.
Okay, this one.
Why would this not be an opportunity for Chinatown to expand north given that children of Chinese are in the higher income brackets, identify themselves through.
The question is, why is this not an opportunity for Chinatown to expand northward? That's a great question. Unfortunately, we're not the ones who own the land, but we have the opportunity today and the coming months and coming years to fight for what could benefit Chinatown to expand.
I'll also add that Matthew had shared, the community benefits, that are potentially there from the minority women business enterprises to the amount of jobs, through Hire 360. But like Matthew shared, currently, we're not in a state to be able to actually harness those benefits. And so a conversation we need to have as a community with the developers, with Chicago Fire is how can we actually, as a community that's most impacted by development, like actually be able to harness those benefits. So that's a key thing. And I'd also say that like we will get into the demographics of Chinatown soon, further into the presentation. But we'll learn a little bit more about what our Chinatown actually looks like. And actually, despite national trends of Chinese people being more wealthy or educated, that's often not the demographic for Chinatowns traditionally.
Sorry, yeah.
First of all, I just want to say thanks very much for mentioning that, because I know for myself, I don't trust Joe Mosquito to advocate for Chinatown. But anyways, with all that said, I just wanted to ask, based off of what Consuela and Angela had mentioned about public housing, just thinking about that as a central argument, can you talk a little bit about how public housing has directly been a benefit for Asian and Asian Americans in Chinatown? I think oftentimes there's this story that public housing really kind of represents other residents in Chicago, but not necessarily our people here.
So we asked questions about how public housing actually also is a public benefit that Chinese Americans and other Asian Americans have taken advantage of in the past. And currently, so we have several senior buildings in the area. They're not always built as public housing. So the Housing and Urban Development federal department is primarily helps to control funds going to different communities that build different kinds of public housing. And so I would say that we do have public housing examples in the community and nearby. We probably know people ourselves who take advantage of public housing. And there's a myth that, that we all should understand the model minority myth that Chinese Americans and Asian Americans are subject to. And that's something that maybe clouds how people view the use of public housing by Asian Americans. I will say I'm not an expert, so I don't know if Angela and Consuela has anything to add here, but we can definitely dive into that more in the future. But if anybody, I'm here with so many community members, I know that there must be someone who knows more about public housing than I do. So if anybody wants to add anything, we're out, welcome. Yeah.
And really quickly, further in our presentation as well, one of our students will be covering a little bit about the senior housing in Chinatown. And there's a really, really long wait list. And so there's definitely a need there.
So we know that there's more questions in your minds. Please continue to write those down. We are going to take a short break and then we'll have an open Q&A section later as well. So please go use the bathroom. Let us know if you have questions about that. Bugs are still out there, water still out there. We'll come back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Hello. I'm back. Thank you. I'll let everybody settle down a little bit more. I see some new people coming through the doors. But we're about to get started again. Hopefully everybody had a chance to use the bathroom or get an extra bow or mingle around. I know I saw a lot of people talking. We love lively dialogue and conversation, so props to you all. But now that we've had some time to process all the information about the 78, what does all this mean for Chinatown? Before I get into our Chinatown, it's important to understand that there is a pattern with Chinatown's strength. Chinatowns across the nation are threatened by gentrification and displacement from New York, Philly, DC, and Seattle. There's a lot we can learn from Chinatowns about preservation and thriving. Specifically today, we'll be diving into DC's Chinatown as a case study for displacement. In the 1990s, DC seized the land around Chinatown via eminent domain, which is the power of the government to use to take private property for public use with compensation to the owner. Raising and clearing existing properties and leasing it to Washington's NBA and NHL team. Team owner Abe Poland for $100 million below market value. The impact was devastating. From 1980 to 2020, the API population went from 3,000 to 300. And now the city has put in hundreds of $1 million again to renovate this arena to get a team to stay after a move like 4 years ago. But it wasn't just eminent domain that displaced DC's Chinatown. Studies show that within a 5-mile radius of newly built stadiums, on average, rent raised 28% and property values increased a staggering 70%. While it might sound good for homeowners to get more value from their properties, there are downsides to dramatic and sudden increases, particularly to people who have fixed incomes. In Chinatown, there are more vulnerable populations, for example, renters living with people that we'll get to after this slide. So while it's great to hear the fire will be privately funded by Joe and Spito, it's important to consider the parallel between what happened in the 1990s for Capitol Arena and what happened and its impact on DC's Chinatown and the Chicago Fire Stadium in our Chinatown. It's also noteworthy to mention that private funding doesn't actually mean private funding, because there's a lot of public funding that needs to occur in order to make the project possible. When you look at the case of Capitol Arena, Abe Poland, a very wealthy man who owned 2 sports teams, privately funded $250 million, but still relied on $61.5 million for public funding. Yeah, for pre-development costs specifically, such as utilities, railways, etc. They're all listed up there under the Capitol Arena. These costs have a lot of similarities to what the TIF was originally going to be used for, like transportation infrastructure and utilities, since Related Midwest is constructed on completely undeveloped land, like no sewers, no plumbing, anything below the ground where the 78 stands on, where it's going to stand on. Ultimately, it stands to be seen what the total public funding needed will be and what the new TIF will be used for. That was an overview about the importance of critically engaging the 78's planning and development process. We'll open the, or actually, since we already did a short Q&A, I'll introduce Eric, who will be talking more about Chinatown's history, and what we can do as a community in order to make sure that Chinatown benefits from the potentials of its new developments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matthew, for explaining the cautionary example of DC and the Capital One Arena. As we all heard, the Capital One Arena displays over 2,700 DC Chinatown residents. Okay. Now, I will explain the demographic reasons to why Chicago's Chinatown is particularly vulnerable to displacement. So, as you can see, 35% of residents earn below the poverty line. Greater than 42% are over the age of 50, and 54% have attained less than a high school level education. All in all, we are a minority, elderly, low-income community, of whom a majority of members hold lower than high school education levels. Thus, our residents are uniquely vulnerable to displacement and any changes in rent or property tax. If large luxury developments come to fruition, property values will naturally rise, urging landlords to raise rents, which may lead to residents unable to afford to rent where they live. Now, allow me to explain the following maps. The red rectangle represents the 78, as you can all see. The map on the left compares the annual income. The darker the green, the higher the income. It is notable that where UIC, South Loop, and the near South Side lies, the green is extremely dark. However, Chinatown is extremely light green, showing the vast disparity of income between it and its neighbors. A similar phenomenon is seen on the right. The map on the right shows educational attainment, measured by the percent of population with a bachelor's degree in college or higher. Chinatown's neighbors are noticeably darker blue, whereas Chinatown is extremely light blue, showing again Chinatown's disproportionately low level of education attained compared to its neighbors. And renters make up 61% of Chinatown residents. Again, because of the comparatively low income and education level of Chinatown's residents, Chinatown is uniquely vulnerable to changes in property taxes and rent. And look, Chinatown's displacement is not a worry that comes with no precedent. Chinatown's past demonstrates a history of sidelining and harm. In 1912, there is a displacement of the original Clark Street Chinatown. In 1933, the World Fair demolished another part of Chinatown by widening the street. In 1960s, we saw the construction of the Dan Ryan Expressway. In 2019, we saw the parking lot scandal with disgraced then Alderman Solis. And in 2021, most recently, we saw the River 78 Casino, which was once considered to put to the 78 without Chinatown's voice. And so, let me elaborate on what happened in 1912. Chinatown lay at the mouth of the Central Railroad Station. The city of Chicago did not want Chinatown to be the first thing that people saw. Thus, landlords raised rent prices, pushing Chinatown's residents and businesses out of the original Clark Street Chinatown. Moving on to the 1960s Dan Ryan Expressway, you may be saddened to hear that the Dan Ryan Expressway cut Chinatown and destroyed Chinatown's only two green spaces, Hardin Square and Stanford Park. It took decades of activism from Leonard Louis to get Kingtown Park built, the first part in years. Now, I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the map on the right. On the left is Chinatown before the Dan Ryan, and then on the right is Chinatown after. You can see how the highway cuts through the community, leaving it landlocked and segregated. I would like to remind everybody that we in Chicago hold the only growing Chinatown in the nation, and that's because we were displaced over 100 years ago. Chinatowns have always been near downtown areas because they were undesirable places to live, and only with Chinatown's development has it begun to move. But now, as downtown comes closer, what does that mean for Chinatown? And so, what is the 78 response? With a private actor, these questions introduce very interesting elements of inquiry. In meetings that organizers have had, leaders of Related Midwest expressed that they can't fight gentrification because that isn't under their responsibility. So, if the impact of their project isn't their responsibility, then whose is it? Even outside Chicago, as we heard from Matthew, it is clear to see that Chinatowns and Asian communities are often overlooked, often afterthought. For voices to matter, we need to engage. And we thank you for being here today because becoming aware is the first step. We need to engage and understand that community-driven development and voice is actually possible. Isn't only possible, but it's proven. Better yet, we have two shiny examples here at Puja Center, where we all are right now. Chinatown's very own elderly homes and Chinatown Square. So let me give a brief introduction. After an influx of new immigrants in the 60s, by the 90s, Chinatown's elderly population was rapidly increasing. And so in 1994, CASTLE, which stands for the Chinese American Service League, applied for a grant from the US Department of Housing and Urban Development. But despite being only a first-time applicant, they were granted $6.7 million from HUD. And now you can see that beside Chinatown Square Plaza are 90 affordable or handicap accessible apartments called Gao, meaning happy to live here. And so Chinatown seniors for over 20 years have been able to enjoying their later years in a place where they're served near home and in their own language. That is the true community success. Next, Chinatown Square. Now, after Chinatown was cut off by the Dan Ryan Expressway, as you saw earlier, in 1984, local business leaders formed the Chinese American Development Corporation, purchasing an abandoned rail yard on Archer Avenue 4 years later. So what they did was they transformed the 32-acre parcel into the mixed-use Chinatown Square, which opened in 1993, extending Chinatown's commercial district northward. Now, I don't know if you all know this, but originally, no vendors were willing to enter Chinatown Square. But now Chinatown Square is a bustling integral part of Chinatown that brings income and jobs to the community. So that's another example of a community-driven development success. Lastly, let's look at development where the residents successfully advocated and turned the outside development into another community-driven development. So this is the Obama Presidential Center. It will be a lively community hub, an education center, and an economic anchor, and also a library. And right as the residents of Woodlawn heard about the development, they formed the Obama Center Community Benefits Agreement Coalition, receiving the development on their own terms, thus successfully forming a community benefits agreement with the developers, which promised a whopping 52 city-owned vacant lots for affordable housing, and a $1 million commitment to the home improvement grant program. So actually, to this day, the construction of this Obama Center has not been completed. However, thanks to the activism and for fighting for their voice, residents can rest assured that the opening of the center will not move them, and instead will provide a community space with libraries and educational opportunities nearby where they live. And so, though the incoming developments leave the future of Chinatown a little uncertain, we know that Chinatown can be strong. Chinatown has asserted its interests on the casino. It is developed on its own terms, and other neighbors have successfully made agreements. And we can do it again. With development comes many possible benefits, and we must ensure Chinatown has a voice. Next, Grace Chan McKibben will tell us about what our next steps are as community members and the power of community.
It's always hard to follow him. Wish I could borrow some of that energy at my age, when I was a physician. Okay, so what's next? So we are currently, this is just the beginning. I'd like to start conversation. I want to make sure that everybody has all the background. Sometimes you hear just little snippets of different presentations that may not have a comprehensive understanding of what's being presented and the history of the context. And then we are talking to neighboring communities, Pilsen, Bronxville, that have also seen similar issues with gentrification and displacement, and make sure that we're coordinated in our approach. We've also been talking to our South Loop neighbors as well. The South Loop neighbors are keenly interested in having a high school, and many of you are interested in a high school for the area. And we are in conversation with the South Loop neighbors and friends to see what the common interests are. Our specific asks for high school are slightly different from the South Loop's ask. So I think that in as much as working together, we'll have to coordinate, just like we'll have to coordinate with Pilsen and Bronxville. There are many, many complex issues. I'm sure that within Chinatown, Bridgeport, there's a wide diversity of different opinions that we're here to listen to all the different opinions, even in right here in this room. I'm 100% sure that you are not thinking exactly the same thoughts as your neighbor, and that's totally fine. This is what, this is what city's best at, is listening and collecting, collaborating, coordinating. So that's what we're going to do. We'll continue community education, outreach. We'll do some more formal collection of data During summer fair, we started collecting some survey data, we'll continue that. We'll do some focus groups to make sure that we are getting all the different voices in. Sometimes survey data, we see some things that don't have the nuances of the groups and interviews. We also want to make sure the folks that are the quietest and that are not often heard, will be heard. Because sometimes the loudest person will be really, dominates, so we don't want that. And, so that's what we need to do, and that continues. The core of CDCC for 27 years, we've been coordinating community voices and making sure that we are amplifying the collective voice and making sure that we are amplifying the collective interest. So that's what we're gonna do. And next time. So in doing this, we demonstrate the power of community. Community is people. Community are our collective voices. Community is exactly, what Eric is just talking about. He just gave you fine examples of how, when the community works together, we're able to address needs from senior housing projects to pushing back against the casino, from building Chinatown Square to all the libraries, community organizations that we have today. Everything is built because there's a will of the people and we're able to all work together. And then we are able to have not only our voices heard, but to be able to have an impact and have concrete benefits to our community. And that's what we want to do. And by being here today and showing your interest, you are helping us take this first step of building power. And so power to you and to our people. Thank you. Yeah, if there are any questions, we'll try to answer as much as we can. So we have invited Billy de West and the fire to do presentations and to talk to the community through Alderwoman Lee is coordinating with Alderwoman Dow. There will be many more conversations, small and large. I think that this is the first step and want to invite the questions that you may have at this time.
I know there's questions out there, so if you submitted a question and you feel so led to come up and say your question, we would really love that. If not, our GCC members will ask those. Is there anyone? Yes. Thank you. So, a question came up that I think we need to clarify for a lot of people. What's the difference between affordable housing and public housing? And with the change in the attitudes of the current administration, that may reduce the amount of affordable housing that we have. So if you could explain what affordable housing is, that's great news in this. I was saying, wow, we got 20% affordable housing, but it still could be $2,000 a month, right? Yeah,
exactly, and we talked a little bit about that before. So public housing is intended for the lowest income people. So think about the public housing that was built after World War II to accommodate folks that are returning. And that's what some of the housing projects are. I know that sometimes people have a lot of negative feelings about those particular projects, but they were intended for people to have the lowest income. Affordable housing works on affordable. And generally, there, may look at charts and you see 30% AMI, 40% AMI, 60% AMI, 80% AMI. What does that mean? AMI means average area median income. Thank you. Yeah, area median income. And it depends on what area you're talking about. We just showed the chart that showed much higher income in the southern area and in the US area than in some of the other areas like Chinatown, like Carson, Bronzeville, the median income is much lower. So when we talk about affordable housing, 80% AMI is going to be, what that means is that is 80% of the average income right about that area. And that's going to be much higher in one area than in another area. Further, my observation is that many times in affordable housing developments, they might say 40% of the units are affordable, but only, um, 5% or 10% is for 30% AMI. So then you're still talking about most of the people not being able to afford it. So I think those are some of the questions that we're asking you to ask yourself and to continue to ask whenever the term for the housing itself, yeah.
Do you think we can change this demand that's happening, or will it get worse? So we're at the perfect timing to be collecting community feedback and to do something together. So I do think we have a lot of power to mitigate this harm that could come to Chinatown. There might be questions in your head, what is it gonna look like? It might take 10 years, 20 years. But one of the primary concerns is that property value will shoot up very fast and sudden before you can make more money to afford your new rent and your new property taxes, right? And we know that property taxes is on a lot of people's minds. And so if we're thinking about Chinatown, and we all know in this room that Chinatown is a truly residential community. It's not just commercial, it's not just boba and pop pop, right? We have folks who are at 23rd and Wentworth, 24th and Wentworth buying groceries by the dollar pound. You know, there are people who are making honest livings and want to stay because we have language access in the community. They can access healthcare, they can access social services, their kids can go to school, elementary school, Haynes. Those are walkable places and assets. The library, the field house, the park, to remind us all that we collectively fought for those things, those benefits for this community. So we did it then, we can do it again and fight for the best case scenario for Chinatown.
Hello, generally, or I have two questions. Generally, what types of developments in this space would be beneficial to Chinatown?
Yeah, generally, I think we talked about public housing, affordable housing, we talked about schools. We have concerns about where the school is located and benefit which communities. So those are all options, I believe. Is there any, public housing would be great.
That's also something we want to hear from you all too, and that's why we want to do more focus groups, community engagement, etc. Actually, at the last part of our session today, or town hall today, there will be an opportunity to tell us what would you want to see out of Chinatown, and think of it in a very visionary way. You are from this community, you visit this community often, you grew up in this community. What do you think is missing? And let us know, because that will dictate what we actually fight for. There's been many cases in like throughout history and throughout the US in which community benefits agreements have been made where there is land donated to have a theater or like an arts program, a community center. There's many, if we are able to vision it, then we can be able to fight for it.
Yeah, can I just add one more thing? We talked about DC and that was quite depressing, but I want to remind us that Philadelphia, Chinatown did recently win their fight against their arena. And now they're able to perform a vision. They've done the focus groups and now they're published a people's vision for Market Square East. So we want to dream big with this community because we know that you have ideas and you live here and you breathe here and you work here. So we want to hear what you think. So thank you.
And then what kinds of opinions could we take and spread outside of Chinatown to help others understand?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about our neighboring communities. So what studies have shown is that stadiums do have a 5 mile, at least a 5 mile radius of very imminent and fast impact on property values and rent. So we definitely want to make sure that we're talking to our neighbors and forming a coalition to ask for these benefits together. Just because we're the closest neighboring community doesn't mean that only our voice should be heard. So we plan to do that. I think if you can share the content that we provide online on our social media and just talk to folks about what is their life like, right? And are they starting to find rent unaffordable? Are they nervous about, rising grocery costs? What is I think listening to what other folks are experiencing first is always a great first step. So I appreciate that question. Thank you. Is there anything else, Brad? Okay.
Hello, hi, so my name is Guy Young, I'm a youth leader at Madden. And I was getting that public housing is really important, especially since you become eligible for public housing at retirement age, which is 65. And it looks like there's currently a 20-year wait list from what I'm getting. So I was just wondering, since there's for affordable housing, there's also loopholes, so I'm just concerned is like related to Midwest and Chicago fire trying to build public housing for the community. And if they don't want to, are there ways they can get out and move that?
I think this really depends on all of us. We talked about the power of the community, and we talked about potential tools that the community can participate in, and also ordinances that can be passed. But also, which is, bargaining and reaching agreements. So there were many, many different ways that we can work together to make sure that the developers as well as the city will listen to the voices of the people and make sure that affordable housing, senior affordable housing, and whatever it is that you must desire would be needed. Now, it might take a while to be able to work things out. There might be many details to work out. I think it's a matter of working together and focusing on priorities.
Thank you.
All right, so this is a question from the Zoom, and is anyone from Chinatown working with any other neighborhoods affected? Do we know what their responses are?
We are currently talking to organizations and all of these other neighborhoods that we talked about. I think that, if you look back at the map of the 78, it borders all of these communities that I'm talking about. South Loop to the north, Chinatown to the south, and then Bronzeville to the east, and parts of East Ocean to the west. So I think that we are talking to all the different organizations and trying to understand the needs from the surrounding communities to make sure that we are able to coordinate and collaborate. And I see.
Yeah, so, yeah, there are three of them. So this question asks, there are loopholes for affordable housing and established public housing plan for their training facilities. What concerns are there in establishing public housing?
What concerns are there? I think the general desire is to have housing for some of the lowest income people, but I think that in general, there's a lot of people have negative stereotypes of low income folks, and I just wanted to preface that. But at the same time, Chinatown is one of the lowest income neighborhoods in the surrounding area. New York City's Chinatown has one of the highest poverty rates in across the nation. So I think that folks should not think about low income as a detriment. It is a feature, and it is something that we need to, if folks need help with housing, we need to be able to have them.
I'm so happy to have
Wilson.
Yes, Wilson now living in Chinatown. I live on Young Parkway, and my children were grown in Pilsen, and I worked in Pilsen as an organizer. However, the one thing that makes me want to think about coalition with other neighborhoods is that there's right now some really positive stuff. They're pushing for lower taxes. They're pushing for help with their housing, because a lot of our folks decided they're not going. They're going to stay in Pilsen, and their children are helping their parents who, are low income. But we used to have those programs when we worked in the community, free sidewalks, lots for sale for $1. And also we had a lot of people that got free orchards, a lot of stuff that was necessary. What is the present administration, what is our push for that? Because they're not gonna do it unless, like you said, we push, and I'm going to help.
The current federal environment definitely does not help. We are in unprecedented times, and we are, again, I'm grateful that ultimately is here. Ugo County from the mayor's office is here so that you can bring back to your colleagues, in city council as well as in city hall about some of these concerns. We need to work together. It has to be a joint solution, community where nonprofits, the for-profit entities and government, so that we can all help each other and be able to, build better. So there's just no other way. We cannot divide to different races and different ethnicities. We cannot divide it to higher income people versus lower income people and so on. It is not going to work. We all have to work together.
Yeah, thank you for reminding us that there are public vehicles that worked before that brought community benefits, so. If they're not the developers, say, like mitigating gentrification is not their responsibility, it is ours to ask for it ourselves. So we know that there have been precedent of things like that working and helping communities, and so we need to put our heads together to make sure that we ask for the right things for the community. I know that we have some community input activities in the back, and I want to just also plug that we have a brief survey just about your primary concerns about this development. At the front desk, there's a QR code, it comes with a prize. There's a Chinatown Small Business Passport with 8 businesses participating with coupons in there, so please go out before you leave. Please, I'm not telling you to leave yet, but please fill that out before you head out. I just want to take 1 or 2 last questions if there's anyone in the audience, and we'll definitely publish a FAQ afterwards about what we do. Any more questions?
Maybe one more, because I really want to leave time for the interactive activity, so that would be a great thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I know that like the Chinatown teams, they've been working extensively on this case, right? So I actually want to hear from any of the youth, like, what are their concerns? Because, like, returning 30s, so they are the next generation of youth. So from the period of time doing research on this case, by the time this project is gonna finish, they will be grown up, like us right now. So I want to see like, what are they find out during this case and what are their concerns or positive side, negative side, anything.
Yeah, thank you, Shiva. I'm gonna defer to the people matter you because, you all have heard from the team coalition.
Hi, so, what I understand, it was concerns from the youth on what future policy relating the stadium being built. So I think one of the main problems isn't actually the stadium being built, but it's actually the concern of just knowing whether the stadium is being built or not. I know that a lot of people right now don't know the stadium is being built, so they usually don't have an opinion, which is probably the most concerning part. I think if the stadium was built, also knowing that the jobs, because jobs being built, I think there was 10,000 temporary for construction and 5,000 jobs that were already permanent. Those jobs would be great. And a lot of people of my age are focusing a lot of them on inclusivity. So not particularly in representing a specific like race control. So not just Asian Americans in general, but the well-being of the public health and the well-being of the public economy. So speaking from that point, there has, I know a lot of kids as well are learning English and speaking English as the main language. So there's not a lot of time to connect with your culture, especially when academics and extracurriculars are such a high standard now, especially if we're going to higher schools, higher education, to actually get out of such an economic standpoint. So I think the main concern is no opinion, especially, but also when the stadium will be built, it's also just the jobs, because having jobs especially can seem really great, but it depends on the people it's impacting. And right now, as we're representing and trying to do this for the betterment of the Chinatown community, it wouldn't be beneficial if other people were receiving the benefits as well. But I think that as someone of my age, even though as someone as With being as an Asian, well, I think it's great if other people are positively impacted. But also, there's also gonna be a lot of issues just with the stadium that we have to consider, well, we have to consider, but not deeply, like traffic and other issues just revolving around the stadium, which is very important. Thank you.
Anyone else from the Key Coalition wants to, Arnold, maybe? Key concerns of you? Okay, well, you can talk to them, they will be there for the rest of the evening, they're not going anywhere, some of them might be going to college, but there will be continuously involved, so thank you again for being here, please go engage, with the community input, and Eugene's gonna say a bit about it.
Just so you all know, there are different markers for community engagement, based on whether or not you live in Chinatown, whether you live in a neighboring community, or whether you're a resident of somewhere elsewhere in Chicago. So make sure to talk to the teams about that. And I would really encourage you to ask that question, that last question to all our teams, because so many people share about their personal ties to Chinatown and how they've seen it change. And that's the reason why they joined the team coalition. So thank you so much. And also, can we get to the last slide, please? Because there are some QR codes for how to stay involved in this, quick or not, but, yeah. So make sure to fill out the survey, scan these QR codes and talk to the people at the front as you're on your way out too.